Hi, everybody. This is the Baseball Head, the amazing, spectacular, terrific, the great one, the People's Champion, your host, the Hut, and welcome back to another visit to the insane asylum known as WFAN.
They're coming to take me away, ha-ha. They're coming to take me away, ho-ho, hee-hee, ha-ha, to the funny fun.
And welcome back to the Baseball Hut 3, and hopefully you like this video and hit that subscribe button. So, right now we're talking about WFAN and really the disruption that it's had over the last few days, really this whole week, since it hasn't been announced yet. You know, it hasn't been officially announced because obviously Craig Carton has not officially signed the contract to return to WFAN, but that is the rumor, that's the word. They talked about it on the air, all the different hosts that have been affected by it. And they have is pretty open about it. He's going to take over the afternoon show. Originally, he wanted to work again with Evan Roberts. Evan Roberts said no. And Evan Roberts compared it to being in a marriage, which was a very strange kind of way to explain why he didn't want to do it. Very bizarre. Then what we learned was that Evan was going to go back in the mid-morning show, which is the mid-afternoon, mid-morning, midday show, and take his partner, his partner, Cheeky Barber. And what's going to happen there is the guys that were there in the morning, mid-morning, midday, Brandon Tierney and Sal Licata, are basically in limbo. So they could be fired. Maybe they take over the show at night. That goes on from 6 to 10. Anything can happen here. You feel bad for these four guys because these four guys had their whole sort of routines and lives disrupted by this guy. Now, I've talked a lot about this on YouTube, about how so many people have popped up over the years doing YouTube channels and having YouTube videos and are outside what the mainstream is. I'm completely out of the mainstream, that's for sure. And I got like this Third Baseball Hut now, and it's doing really well. I would ask, please hit the subscribe button and like this video. I want to get to 100 subscribers. Boy, the channel's going crazy. That 100 is a big milestone. But you have people that are independent people. But I would say this: I'm a little concerned, as an aside, that so many of the mainstream is coming in, throwing athletes on the platform. All these old commentators that you walked away from, you got sick of, and you gravitate towards your hosts and other YouTubers. Now, unfortunately, a lot of the YouTubers are bending the knee, taking the knee, and giving in to the mainstream, which is very concerning. Not for me, but for them. But one thing we've learned about radio, particularly, and this is terrestrial radio, not the XM radio, is that radio continues to do the same kind of, especially sports radio, they kind of have the sort of 1970s, 1980s shock jock. And that's what Craig Carton is to a certain degree. But what's interesting is they don't really, and I would say this, and this is what's going to be very interesting for me, is how do I approach this guy? Because nobody makes fun of him at the radio station. And if the shoe were on the other foot, and this guy has had a criminal past, criminal background, Craig Carton would be making fun of this guy. And just completely ripping into him. Especially if he wasn't a co-worker. Carton would be ripping into him continuously. Nobody at the radio station will do that because they're all afraid of him. I thought that they were afraid of Boomer Esiason, but I think they might be more afraid of this guy because this guy grifted a lot of people out of money. Which is a big reason why he's in prison. Amongst many reasons, I guess tax evasion too. I got to read up on him a little bit, but people are starting to question. Is this like a? Well, I'll read you. This is from Barrett Media. Is Craig Carton's return to WFAN innovation or another reboot? Quote, at some point, major market sports radio will have to stop digging up old playbooks and start drawing new ones. All the same nonsense, all the same people, all the same approach that was very successful in the 70s, 80s. What year is this? It's almost 2026. Who doesn't love a good comeback story? The old grizzled veterans looking to recapture the success of their youth in the same barn they once competed in. We see in professional sports, sports entertainment, sports radio. When it was announced that Craig Carton was returned to WFAN this January, it wasn't shocking. It's not official yet. Keep that in mind. Just over 2 months ago, the writer examined the possibility of return and whether it made sense. The writer knew Carton's ties to WFN and station management as well as his long run of success with the brand. Once he became a free agent, a reunion felt inevitable. It was always more of a matter of when than why. However, Carton's return fits a familiar pattern for major market sports radio brands. Instead of building toward the industry's future, the all-reliable still seems to get the upper hand. Have major market stations simply given up on developing depth and nurturing the next generation? Now, I will bring up, and I will do another video on Keith McPherson, because he was one of the newer guys. All these people on the fan right now, these are guys that have been here for 10, 15, 20 years. Evan Roberts has been associated with the radio station since he was a little kid. I'm not joking. I discovered him. Boomer Esiason has been at the radio station 20 years. Greg Giannotti, he's been an employee there for many, many years. Same thing with Spaz Licata. He's been there for many years. So all these guys have been there for a long time. You know, Brandon Tierney's been there, 10 years? Tiki Barber, 10 years? These guys have been around a long time, and they don't develop anybody. They haven't developed anybody. Some outsider. They brought in Keith McPherson. He was an outsider. But then he quit. I'll do a video on him. I'll try to figure out why he really quit. Very murky what happened. Again, I've spoken with enough sports radio talent around the country to know the industry is struggling to define what comes next. Who is the next rising star? Question mark. The next Mike Francesa or Mike Valenti? Who? Does their name have to be Mike? You know, okay. I've had fun with that one. Okay, the hell with that. Read somebody else's jokes. I have my own jokes here. These are the real questions I consider when I watch major market brands chase what once worked rather than adapt to the moment. This isn't a knock on Carton or any of his contemporaries. Their resumes speak for themselves, but is this a long-term solution or short-term correction? Is this about getting back in the green next year or remaining relevant in the next decade? It's not just New York City. Carton is getting a third crack at the apple because management clearly doesn't believe the current lineup is working. And to Carton, instant name recognition yesterday, credibility with the aging audience today. It's a square peg and a square hole for now. Reports suggest Carton will be paired with WFAN overnight host Chris McMonagle, a.k.a. the Psycho Killer, and when he returns in January. Says the old guard of elevating new blood, possibly it could be an intentional step forward. Well, no, he wanted to go back with Devin Roberts. And nobody else wanted to pair him. Tiki didn't want to work with him. They didn't bother asking Boomer. However, McMonagle is hardly new blood as he'll be entering his 20th year. Holy shit. At WFAN in 2026. Wow. This guy's been there a long time. We've seen this same formula happen in other major markets too. We've seen this formula in the other major markets as well. Mike Mizzanelli returned to 97.5 The Fanatic in 2024, only to be laid off in 2025. Dan McNeil returned to 670 The Score in Chicago after falling out with ESPN Chicago on multiple personal setbacks. Even Mike Francesa came out of retirement for another WFAN run. A comeback he later called a mistake. Apparently it's a mistake that others have not learned from. It happens even on the national syndication front. Mike Greenberg returned to host a solo show for the network following a masterful run on Mike and Mike and Mike and Mike. Greeny lasted from 2020 until this past January. Rich Eisen made his return to ESPN Radio this fall. Clay Travis is toying with the idea of becoming a free agent. Would Fox Sports Radio come calling? Regarding Carton's return, his success at the fan has earned him 3 shots at one of the biggest brands in the country. Was persona working in a market like Chicago or Los Angeles? Yes. He could dominate one market on one radio station in New York City. However, national syndicators would more than likely look elsewhere because of that. And I would mention, he had his Fox Sports show got canceled, and they were rebranding it. So the nation did not really care for him. He's got a very strange personality, a very strange way about him. It's hard to describe his personality on the air. You know, Carton returning to WFAN isn't a problem, it's a symptom. A sign that too many major market brands have grown addicted to the past, terrified that daring to develop new voices might cost them a rating or two. Meanwhile, the next generation isn't waiting around. They're already building audiences on platforms these stations barely acknowledge. At some point, major market sports radio will have to stop digging up old playbooks and start drawing new ones. That's right. That's why so many people are on YouTube. And a lot of unknowns. I'm an unknown, you know, pretty much to this day, which I love. But you're starting to see all these names coming onto YouTube. And just as an aside, but you notice you haven't seen anybody that's been a YouTuber. I guess John Boy, but he's kind of too big for WFAN. That's probably the only one you could think of. But they haven't brought in anybody aside from John Boy. You haven't seen anybody from this platform or from any of the other platforms where they do videos and stuff. Nobody from X, Twitch, or whatever that's out there, or Rumble. I don't think Rumble does much with sports, but I mean, that's the one thing you notice about this whole situation is they went back to the retread. And this is what he is. He's a retread. You know. He is an acquired taste. And one thing I noticed is that of the comments that I've gotten from people, I would say about 70-30 don't really like Carton. Or maybe 65. 65% don't like him. And 35% do like him, from the comments that I've read. I do know one thing. He's extremely popular on here because people have been writing like crazy and watching the videos like crazy. So I thank you if you come and watching this video. But you let me know what you think about all this stuff. This is it's kind of complicated in a lot of ways because you kind of, it's very, it's very fluid. And I have said in other videos that this comeback will not last as long as the second comeback. That is my prediction for this situation. Comebacks don't normally last that long, and this is the third runaround. The third spin around doesn't usually last as long as the second one, and that's my prediction. And this is another. Actually, this wasn't too insane of a video for your host, but this is the insane asylum. And I guess maybe Carton's a little bit institutionalized. He can't really make it out in the real world. He's got to come back in, get his medication, and be part of the sort of the criminally insane wing of WFAN.
They're coming to take me away, ha ha. They're coming to take me away, ho ho, hee hee, ha ha. To the funny part.